What happens when the woman you see as a beautiful decoration becomes the architect of your ruin? For Kelsey Jones, a man who built an empire from steel and shear, Will his wife, Keelan, was the final perfect acquisition. But as he sat in his penthouse office, the divorce papers gleaming on the mahogany desk, he made a fatal miscalculation. He believed he held all the power. He gave her a week to sign away her life, her future, and their unborn child. He was waiting for her signature. What he didn't know was that while he waited, she wasn't crying. She was calculating. And in one of the most audacious corporate maneuvers Wall Street had ever seen, the pregnant wife had already frozen every single dollar he had. This isn't a story of a broken heart. It's the story of a queen taking the throne. The air in the Jones penthouse, perched 68 floors above Central Park, was always the same cool, still, and smelling faintly of white lilies and money. It was an atmosphere Kelsey Jones had meticulously curated, much like everything else in his life. His suits were bespoke Savile Row, his watch a Patek Philippe Grandmaster chime, and his wife Keelan was arguably his most prized possession. Keelan Rossi had been an art historian, full of fiery passion and opinions when she met him. Kelsey, the self-made titan of Jones Industries, had been captivated by her vibrancy, a stark contrast to the transactional relationships he was used to. He'd pursued her with the same relentless focus he applied to a corporate takeover, showering her with a world she'd only read about in books. In a whirlwind of private jets, Parisian galas, and yachting in Monaco, she had become Mrs. Jones. 5 years later, the fire had been tamed into a soft, decorative glow. Keelan's days were a structured procession of charity luncheons, gallery openings, and fittings with designers who addressed her with a reverence usually reserved for royalty. She was beautiful, elegant, and impeccably dressed. To the outside world, she was the enviable wife of a billionaire. To Kelsey, she had become part of the penthouse's luxurious furniture, beautiful to look at, comfortable to have around, but ultimately an object. The shift had been gradual. At first, his late nights were closing the Helios deal. The frantic calls were investor emergencies. His increasing distance was the pressure of the empire. Keelan, wanting to be the supportive wife, had accepted it. She'd pour him a Macallan 30 when he came home at 2 a.m., the scent of an unfamiliar perfume clinging faintly to his collar, and would tell herself she was imagining it. But the signs were becoming impossible to ignore. There was a name that kept appearing in hushed phone calls: Chloe. Chloe Vance, a ruthlessly ambitious VP in his marketing department, with a social media presence as sharp and curated as her ambition. Keelan had seen her once at a company gala, a woman with predator's eyes and a smile that didn't reach them. The final brutal confirmation came not from a lipstick stain or a stray text, but from a jeweler's receipt. It had fallen from his briefcase, a private purchase from Cartier for a viper necklace. A piece she had admired months ago, but Kelsey had dismissed as too aggressive. The recipient on the discreet gift receipt, however, wasn't I, Jones. It was C. Vance. The delivery address was a luxury condo in Tribeca, one she now knew Kelsey's private holding company had purchased 3 months prior. That evening, Keelan waited. She didn't prepare his drink. She didn't busy herself with a book in the library. She sat on the cream-colored sofa in the main living area, the skyline of Manhattan glittering behind her like a cold, indifferent audience. The receipt lay on the glass coffee table. Kelsey walked in just after midnight, shrugging off his coat. "Long day," he grunted, loosening his tie, not truly looking at her. "The Helios deal is in its final phase. Utterly draining." "I'm sure it is," Keelan said, her voice unnervingly calm. He finally stopped and looked at her. He saw the receipt, and for a fraction of a second, a flicker of annoyance, not guilt, but annoyance, crossed his face. The mask of the patient husband slipped, revealing the ruthless CEO beneath. "All right," he said, sighing as if she were a tedious business problem to be solved. He walked to the bar, poured his own scotch, and downed it in one go. "Let's not make this more dramatic than it needs to be." There was no apology, no denial, just the cold, hard finality of a business transaction. "Her name is Chloe," he stated, not as a confession but as a fact. "It's been going on for a while. These things happen, Keelan." Keelan felt a strange, icy calm spread through her veins. The heartbreak was there, a deep physical ache in her chest, but it was being rapidly overtaken by a chilling clarity. This man, the man she had loved, the father of the child growing inside her, was looking at her as if she were a line item on a balance sheet that was no longer profitable. "I see," she said, her voice a whisper. "And the baby?" She hadn't told him yet. She had been waiting for the perfect moment, a quiet dinner, a weekend in the Hamptons, a romantic, shared joy. The irony was so bitter, it tasted like acid. Kelsey froze the glass halfway to the bar. "The what?" "I'm pregnant, Kelsey. 12 weeks. The silence in the room became absolute. The city hummed and twinkled below, oblivious. Kelsey stared at her. His mind, she could see, not processing the news of a child, but recalibrating a negotiation. He saw a complication, a liability. His face hardened. "That is unfortunate timing." He walked over to his briefcase, pulled out a sleek leather portfolio, and placed it on the coffee table next to the Cartier receipt. He nudged it towards her. "This is a divorce agreement," he said, his voice devoid of all emotion. "It was drawn up by my legal team last month. It's generous, extremely generous under the circumstances." Her hands trembled as she opened it. The legalese was dense, but the numbers were stark. A one-time payment of $10 million. The deed to a small apartment in Belgravia, London. She was to relinquish all claims to Jones Industries, to their homes, their assets, and to sign a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement that would gag her for life. It was a golden severance package. To him it was a fortune. To a man worth an estimated $27 billion, it was less than a rounding error. It was an insult. Tucked inside was a separate document, a termination of parental rights agreement for him to sign after the birth, paired with a trust for the child. He wasn't abandoning his offspring. He was quarantining it, ensuring it would never be a threat to his pristine, uncomplicated new life with Chloe. "Our prenup is ironclad, Keelan." He continued, his voice taking on the familiar tone of a CEO delivering unwelcome news to his board. "My lawyers Thorne and Lynch are the best. They've assured me it's unassailable. This offer is a courtesy to keep things clean and quiet." He looked at his watch. "I have an early flight to Geneva to finalize the Helios funding. I'll be back Friday. I expect you to have signed this by then. A courier will come for it at noon. Be smart about this, Keelan. Don't fight it. You won't win." He turned and walked towards the master suite, leaving her alone with the documents that represented the complete dissolution of her life. He didn't look back. He had closed the deal. Keelan stared at the papers, at the cold clinical signature line waiting for her. He thought he was giving her a week to mourn, to pack, to accept her fate. He thought he was being generous. But in his arrogance, Kelsey Jones had forgotten who she was before she met him. He had forgotten the fire, and he had no idea that a week was more than enough time for a woman with nothing left to lose to burn his entire world to the ground. The Queen had been checkmated, but the game was far from over. For the first 24 hours, Keelan did exactly what Kelsey expected her to do. She shattered. The icy calm evaporated, leaving behind a raw, keening grief that shook the penthouse to its sterile foundations. She cried until her eyes were swollen shut, the vast, empty apartment amplifying her sobs. She wandered from room to room, touching the cold marble, the soulless sculptures, the artifacts of a life that had been a beautiful hollow lie. The $10 million offer wasn't a settlement. It was a price tag. The price of 5 years of her life, her love, her body, and the child she now carried alone. By dawn on the second day, the tears had dried up, replaced by a cold, hard knot of fury in her stomach. It was a fury so pure and so potent, it felt like a power source. Kelsey had called her an unfortunate complication. He had tried to purchase her silence and her child's future with pocket change. He hadn't just broken her heart, he had fundamentally underestimated her. And that was a mistake no one in the cutthroat world of business or marriage should ever make. She picked up the phone and made her first call. Not to her mother, not to a friend, but to the one person she knew who understood the language of war, that Kelsey spoke so fluently, her older sister, Sophia Rossi. Sophia was everything Keelan appeared not to be, a senior partner at a prestigious international law firm in London. Sophia was pragmatic, sharp-tongued, and had a mind like a steel trap. She had always been wary of Kelsey seeing a predator where Keelan had seen a savior. "Bella." Sophia's voice was crisp even through the transatlantic cable. "It's 3 in the morning here. Is everything all right?" "He's divorcing me." Keelan said, her voice flat, devoid of the tears from the night before. She explained everything: the affair with Chloe Vance, the pre-signed papers, the insulting offer, and the pregnancy. There was a moment of silence on the line, and then Sophia spoke, her voice laced with a cold anger that mirrored Keelan's own. "That son of a bitch." Okay, Bella. Listen to me. Do not sign anything. Do not speak to him. Do not respond to his lawyers. Do not pack a single bag. That penthouse is your home. You are a pregnant woman being abandoned by your husband. In the eyes of any court, you are in a position of power no matter what his ironclad prenup says. He said it's unassailable. Keelan whispered, the fear creeping back in. Nothing is unassailable, Sophia snapped, especially when a billionaire is about to close the biggest deal of his life. Where is he now? Geneva, finalizing the Helios funding. Sophia went quiet again, but this time Keelan could almost hear the gears turning in her sister's brilliant legal mind. The Helios deal. He's been working on that for 2 years. He's poured everything into it, hasn't he? His personal capital company liquidity. It's all tied up. Yes, Keelan said, a flicker of understanding beginning to dawn. He said it's his legacy. Good, Sophia said, a predatory smile in her voice. Legacies are fragile. Now you need a lawyer, not a divorce lawyer. You need a shark, a corporate litigator who eats men like Kelsey Jones for breakfast. There's only one person in New York I would trust with this. Her name is Evelyn Reed. She's a legend. I'm going to call her and tell her to expect you. And Bella. Yes. Welcome back, Sophia said softly. I've missed you. Hanging up, Keelan felt the last vestiges of the helpless victim fall away. She was no longer Keelan Jones, the trophy wife. She was Keelan Rossi, and she was going to war. Evelyn Reed's office was not what Keelan expected. It was in a discreet old money building in the financial district, filled with dark wood leather-bound books and the quiet hum of immense power. Evelyn herself was a woman in her late 50s, with sharp, intelligent eyes and a tailored suit that probably cost more than Keelan's first car. She listened to the entire story without interruption. Her fingers steepled her gaze, never wavering. She reviewed the divorce offer and the prenup Keelan had brought with her. When Keelan finished, Evelyn leaned back in her chair. Mr. Jones and his counsel, Marcus Thorne, have made a classic billionaire's mistake, she said, her voice calm and precise. They've mistaken wealth for invincibility, and they've confused a prenuptial agreement with a get-out-of-jail-free card. She slid the prenup across the desk. Sophia was right. No document is ironclad. This one has a standard infidelity clause, but the penalty is negligible, a token increase in the settlement. Thorne wrote this to protect against a typical affair. But this isn't a typical affair, Mrs. Jones. This is a pattern of behavior that, combined with his actions, now constitutes extreme emotional distress and marital abandonment, especially given your condition. But even that is a small hammer. Evelyn leaned forward, her eyes glinting. We're not going to use a small hammer. We're going to use a tactical nuclear weapon. She turned her computer monitor towards Keelan. On the screen was a detailed financial news report about the Helios initiative. It was a massive multi-billion-dollar green energy project that Kelsey was staking his entire company's future on. The deal is set to be finalized and funded by a consortium of Swiss and German banks on Friday, Evelyn explained. To secure this, Mr. Jones has leveraged a significant portion of his personal assets and Jones Industries' liquid capital as collateral. He's cash poor at this exact moment, but on the verge of becoming wealthier than ever. He is, for lack of a better term, financially exposed. What does that mean? Keelan asked. It means he's vulnerable. We are going to file an emergency petition with the family court. We will allege that Mr. Jones is about to enter into a high-risk financial venture and is attempting to fraudulently shield marital assets, the assets of your shared life, and your unborn child's legacy prior to a divorce settlement. We will request an immediate temporary freeze on all his personal and primary corporate accounts pending a full financial disclosure. Keelan felt a jolt of fear and excitement. Can we do that? He has presented you with divorce papers. He has a long-term mistress installed in a property his company owns. You are pregnant with his heir, and he is hours away from moving billions of dollars of what is for now still marital property into a new complex international structure. I can't think of a better case for an emergency injunction, Evelyn stated coolly. He thinks he's in control of the timeline. We are going to take that timeline away from him. The plan required one more element. They needed to know everything. Not just about Kelsey's finances, but about Chloe Vance. Evelyn made a call. An hour later, a man named Arthur Finch arrived. He was unassuming, dressed in a simple tweed jacket, and had the air of a history professor. He was, as Evelyn explained, the best private investigator in the city. Mrs. Jones, Finch said with a polite nod. Evelyn has briefed me. I need everything you know. Schedules, habits, passwords, anything. The smallest detail can unravel the largest lie. For the next few hours, Keelan became a forensic accountant of her own marriage. She gave Finch the number for Kelsey's private driver, the name of his personal banker at Goldman Sachs, the passcode to his home office computer, a detail he'd carelessly mentioned months ago. She, the invisible wife, had seen and heard everything. The hushed calls about Vanguard Corp being a rival bidder for Helios, the name of the shell corporation, Artemis Holdings, that owned Chloe's condo. As she spoke, she realized how much information she had passively absorbed over the years. She was not just a decoration. She had been a silent witness. Finch listened, taking meticulous notes. "This is excellent," he said finally. "Ms. Vance's digital footprint will tell us a story, I assure you. And I'll take a look at Artemis Holdings and this Vanguard rivalry. You'd be surprised what people leave lying around in public records." When Keelan left Evelyn Reed's office that evening, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the concrete canyons of Wall Street. She walked not with the shuffle of a victim, but with the determined stride of a commander. Kelsey was in Geneva, celebrating his impending victory with his mistress. He was waiting for a signature. He had no idea that back in New York, his wife was assembling an army and preparing to launch a preemptive strike that would rock the foundations of his empire. The clock was ticking. But it was no longer his clock. Thursday, the day before the axe was due to fall, was a study in contrasts. In Geneva, Kelsey Jones was living his apotheosis. He and Chloe Vance occupied the royal penthouse suite at the Four Seasons, a palace of glass overlooking the lake. The mood was celebratory. The consortium of bankers had been utterly won over. The final paperwork for the Helios initiative was being drawn up. By noon on Friday, the funds would be transferred, and Jones Industries would ascend to a new global echelon. Chloe, draped in silk and wearing the Cartier Viper necklace, was a vision of victory. "I told you they'd be putty in your hands, Kelsey," she purred, clinking her champagne flute against his. "They see what I see. A king." Kelsey smiled, a genuine, rare smile of pure triumph. Thorne called. The package was delivered to Keelan. "The courier is scheduled for noon tomorrow. It will all be clean. A new empire, a new life." He looked at Chloe, his partner in this new world. He felt no guilt, only a sense of shedding a heavy, outdated skin. Keelan was the past. Chloe was the future. His phone buzzed. It was his CFO, David Chen, calling from New York. Kelsey ignored it. "Not now," he murmured to Chloe. "Nothing can spoil this." In New York, Keelan was living in a state of suspended animation. She had spent the night at a hotel suite booked by Evelyn, a sterile, anonymous space that felt like a command bunker. She hadn't slept. She'd spent the hours staring at her phone, at the single picture from her last ultrasound, the tiny, grainy image of a life that had become her sole reason for this fight. At 9:00 a.m. sharp, Evelyn called. "We're filing now," she said, her voice crisp. "The judge on duty for emergency petitions is Judge Mariah Esposito. She's tough, but she has very little patience for billionaire husbands who try to screw over their pregnant wives. This is our best shot. I'll call you the moment I have news." Keelan disconnected the call and held her breath. The next few hours were the longest of her life. She paced the room, the city below a meaningless blur. This was the point of no return. If the injunction failed, she would have nothing. She would have shown her hand and lost, leaving her at the mercy of a man who had none. At 11:15 a.m., her phone rang. It was Evelyn. "We got it," Evelyn said, and Keelan could hear the fierce satisfaction in her voice. "Full temporary injunction, ex parte. He won't even know what hit him until it's done." The order is being transmitted electronically to every financial institution on our list. Goldman Sachs, J.P. Morgan, Credit Suisse Jones, Industries corporate accounts. Everything. The freeze is happening now. Keelan sank onto the bed, a wave of dizziness washing over her. Now. Right now, Mrs. Jones, Evelyn confirmed. For your husband, the world is about to stop turning. The first inkling of disaster struck Kelsey Jones's world at 11:18 a.m. New York time, 5:18 p.m. Geneva time. He was in the hotel's conference room with the lead Swiss banker about to sign a preliminary document. His phone, lying on the polished table, began to vibrate with an hysterical intensity. It was David Chen, his CFO again. And again. And again. Annoyed, Kelsey finally excused himself and stepped into the hallway. "David, this had better be a matter of life or death," Kelsey snapped. David's voice was strained, panicked. "Kelsey, it's worse. I just got off the phone with our Treasury Department. Our primary operating account at J.P. Morgan is frozen. They're citing a court order." Kelsey felt a cold dread begin to seep into his celebratory warmth. "What are you talking about? A court order from who?" "We don't know it's sealed, and it's not just J.P. Morgan. I'm getting alerts from everywhere. The collateral accounts for Helios, your personal trading accounts at Goldman. Kelsey, everything is locked. We can't move a single dollar. It's like someone threw a switch and turned off the entire company." The blood drained from Kelsey's face. This wasn't possible. A regulatory issue. A mistake. Then a horrifying thought began to coalesce in his mind. Keelan. No, it couldn't be. She didn't have the nerve, the knowledge, the resources. Get Thorne on the phone. Now. He commanded, his voice a low growl. He strode back into the suite where Chloe was admiring the view. "We have a problem," he said, the words tasting like ash. "A fire in New York. I need to handle it." He began to pace his mind, racing, trying to outrun the conclusion that was now screaming at him. He dialed his private banker, his lawyers, anyone he could think of. The answer was the same everywhere. A court order, a complete asset restraint. Number SC-1701, issued by the Supreme Court of New York Family Division. Family Division. The cold dread became a glacial certainty. It was her. He snatched his phone and dialed Keelan's number. It went straight to voicemail. He dialed again. Voicemail. And again. The serene recorded voice of his wife, a voice he hadn't truly listened to in years, was now a monument to his own spectacular failure of judgment. His lawyer, Marcus Thorne, finally called back, his voice grim. "Kelsey, I'm just seeing this now. My office was served 10 minutes ago. She filed an emergency petition. She's claiming marital abandonment, fraudulent conveyance of assets. She's contesting the prenup. The judge granted her an ex parte injunction. It's a goddamn masterstroke of legal terrorism." "Undo it," Kelsey roared, slamming his fist on a marble table, making Chloe jump. "You're my lawyer, fix it." "It's not that simple," Thorne shot back. "This is an emergency order. It'll take days, maybe weeks, to get a hearing to appeal it. And by then, Kelsey, the Helios funding. The consortium's deadline is tomorrow." The reality of it hit Kelsey with the force of a physical blow. The deal of his lifetime, his legacy, was predicated on his ability to move capital. Without access to his funds, the deal was dead. Keelan hadn't just inconvenienced him. She had aimed a missile at the heart of his empire and fired. He ended the call, his breathing ragged. He looked at Chloe, at her beautiful, confused face, the viper necklace suddenly looking garish and cheap. She was a symptom of his arrogance, and he was now paying the price. He dialed Keelan's number one more time, a primal fury building inside him. This time she answered. Her voice was not the voice of the weeping woman he had left behind. It was calm, cool, and carried the timbre of absolute control. "Hello, Kelsey." "What have you done?" he snarled, his voice a venomous whisper. "I believe the legal term is securing the marital estate pending an equitable distribution," she replied, a touch of ice in her tone. "Your lawyers can explain it to you. You've destroyed everything. The Helios deal is going to collapse." "That does sound like an unfortunate complication," she said, throwing his own callous words back at him. The blow was so precise, so surgical, it took his breath away. "I will bury you for this, Keelan," he seethed. "I will spend every last dollar I have to see you get nothing." There was a soft, almost pitying sigh on the other end of the line. "That's the point, Kelsey. You don't have any last dollars to spend. Right now, they're all my dollars. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have the locksmiths here. It's surprising how drafty the penthouse gets when you change the locks. Check your email. My lawyer has sent you our terms for discussion. We'll be in touch." The line went dead. Kelsey stood in the opulent suite, the celebratory champagne going flat on the table, the glittering lights of Geneva, suddenly looking like the fires of his own personal hell. He had waited for her signature, but the pregnant wife, the quiet decoration, had already signed his corporate death warrant, and he had never seen it coming. The fallout was not a gradual decline, it was an implosion. The moment the court order from Judge Esposito rippled through the digital veins of the financial world, Kelsey Jones's name became poison. On the trading floors of Wall Street, the news lit up Bloomberg terminals with a furious red. Analysts who days before had been lauding Kelsey's genius now spoke his name in hushed, speculative tones. On CNBC, their faces grim. The headlines were brutal and relentless. Sterling Industries in freefall as founders' assets, frozen in shock. Divorce battle. Titan in chains. How a prenup dispute put the 8BB Helios initiative on ice. The Sterling scandal sources cite abandonment of pregnant wife. Gross financial mismanagement. Kelsey's humiliating flight back from Geneva was a journey through the 9 circles of his own personal hell. The usual deference from his pilots and crew was replaced by a strained, uncomfortable silence. He sat alone in the plush cabin, the celebratory champagne flutes now mocking artifacts of a victory that had turned to ash in his mouth. His phone, once a scepter of power, was now a torture device, vibrating incessantly with calls from panicked board members, demanding answers, furious investors threatening lawsuits, and a ravenous press corps hungry for every sordid detail. He was a king without a kingdom, locked out of his penthouse and forced to take refuge in a sterile suite at the Carlisle Hotel, a prisoner of his own making. The greatest blow came during a hastily arranged conference call with the Swiss banking consortium. There were no pleasantries. A stern-voiced banker from Zurich, a man who had been fawning over him 48 hours earlier, spoke in cold, formal tones. "Mr. Jones, given the unforeseen legal entanglements and the resulting freeze on the pledged collateral, we are invoking Clause 17B of our preliminary agreement regarding a material adverse change. The consortium is officially terminating its commitment to the Helios initiative, effective immediately." Kelsey listened, his hand gripping his phone so tightly he thought the plastic might crack. His legacy, the green energy project that was to have been his monument, was being dismantled by a man thousands of miles away over a speakerphone. He wanted to roar, to threaten to unleash the fury that was boiling in his blood, but he was utterly impotent. He had no leverage. He had no cash. He had no power. The final betrayal, the one that cut deeper than any business loss, came from Chloe. Her initial calls had been frantic accusatory, but her final call was a masterpiece of cold self-preservation. "I can't do this, Kelsey," she said, her voice devoid of the breathy affection he was used to. It was sharp like shattered glass. "My name, my brand is being dragged through the mud with yours. This messy domestic drama of yours is toxic. I've been advised by my publicist to distance myself completely." "Distance yourself," Kelsey choked out, incredulous. "Chloe, I did this for us." A dry, mirthless laugh came through the phone. "No, Kelsey, you did this for you. I was just a perk of the new life you were designing. I have a career to protect. You're radioactive. Goodbye." The line went dead. He later learned from his security detail that she had cleared out the Tribeca condo within hours. The viper necklace, the symbol of his betrayal, was gone with her. He had torched his marriage and risked his empire for a woman whose loyalty was worth less than the silk sheets she'd slept on. Humiliated, abandoned, and financially paralyzed, Kelsey Jones had no moves left. He could either watch his company be torn apart by lawsuits and a board revolt, or he could walk into the lion's den and beg for a truce. His lawyer, Marcus Thorne, arranged the meeting. The offices of Reed & Associates were the antithesis of Jones Tower's gleaming modern hubris. The building was old stone. The lobby was hushed, and the air smelled of lemon oil and old paper. It was the scent of established power, of secrets kept, and battles won long before men like Kelsey Jones had ever made their first million. As he and Thorne rode the wood-paneled elevator up, Kelsey felt a profound sense of dislocation. He was not here to command or dictate. He was a supplicant entering enemy territory. The boardroom was just as intimidating. At the far end of a vast, dark mahogany table sat Evelyn Reed, her posture radiating a hawk-like focus. And beside her, bathed in the soft morning light from the window, was Keelan. The sight of her sent a jolt through him. He had braced himself for tears, for rage, for the righteous fury of a woman scorned. He was prepared for none of this. She was dressed in a simple, elegant cashmere dress that gracefully accommodated her now more pronounced pregnancy. Her hair was pulled back. Her face was serene, and she met his gaze not with hatred, but with a calm, disconcerting resolve. She looked formidable. The transformation was so complete it was disorienting. This was not the woman he had left in their penthouse a week ago. This was a stranger, and she held all the cards. "Let's dispense with the pretense that you are here." "Voluntarily," Evelyn began, her voice cutting the silence. "Your company's stock has lost 42% of its value. The Helios deal is dead. And 3 of your board members have already contacted me through back channels to express their concerns about your leadership. You are not here to negotiate, Kelsey. You are here to surrender." Thorne, attempting to salvage a scrap of dignity, cleared his throat. "Now, Evelyn, my client is here in good faith to find an amicable resolution to this unfortunate Keelan spoke for the first time, her voice quiet, but carrying immense weight. "Unfortunate is misplacing your car keys, Kelsey. Trying to discard your pregnant wife with a gag order and a pittance while you run off with your assistant is not unfortunate. It's a calculated act of cruelty." Kelsey flinched. Her directness was a weapon he hadn't anticipated. My client, Evelyn, interjected smoothly, taking back control, is willing to petition the court to unfreeze enough capital to prevent the immediate insolvency of Jones Industries. But before we even begin to discuss the terms of that charity, there is another matter we must address, a matter of security. Evelyn gestured to an associate who placed a thin blue folder in the center of the table. As you know, we retained the services of an investigator, Mr. Arthur Finch. He is not a typical PI who rifles through trash cans. Mr. Finch is a forensic specialist, a veritable historian of secrets. We initially hired him to document your relationship with Ms. Vance for the purpose of this divorce, but Mr. Finch is exceptionally thorough. He found something else, something far more interesting. She slid the folder across the table. With trembling hands, Kelsey opened it. Inside were not salacious photos, but something far more chilling: copies of encrypted text messages, logs of burner phone calls, and international wire transfer statements. His eyes scanned the pages, a cold dread solidifying in his gut. He saw Chloe's name next to phrases like confirming SI vulnerabilities and final Helios bid specs received. He saw a payment of $500,000 from a numbered account in the Cayman Islands, dated 2 days after he had won the Helios bid. As Kelsey's mind reeled, struggling to process the impossible data before him, Evelyn's voice narrated his ruin with clinical precision. Vanguard Corp was your main rival for Helios, were they not? You beat them by a razor-thin margin, a fact you celebrated. What a coincidence it is then that Chloe Vance's older brother, Michael Vance, is Vanguard's executive VP of strategy. And what a further coincidence that the Cayman Islands account that has been paying Ms. Vance a handsome consulting fee for the past year is wholly owned by a shell corporation registered to Vanguard's parent company. The pieces slammed together in Kelsey's mind with the force of a physical concussion. The near-psychic way Vanguard had countered his every move. The small, helpful suggestions Chloe had made to his presentations. The sudden, inexplicable data leak from his server 3 months ago that he'd dismissed as a technical glitch. She wasn't just your mistress, Mr. Jones, Evelyn said, delivering the killing blow. She was a corporate spy. Your affair wasn't just a personal indiscretion, it was a catastrophic security breach. Vanguard didn't want to outbid you. They wanted you to win. They played on your ego, let you leverage yourself to the breaking point, all so they could either trigger a hostile takeover when your stock inevitably crashed from a scandal, or simply stand by and pick up the shattered pieces of your life's work for pennies on the dollar. Kelsey stared at the folder, his vision blurring. The humiliation was absolute, a black hole consuming everything. It wasn't just that his wife had outmaneuvered him. It was that he had been a pawn, a fool, a willing marionette in his rival's grander scheme. He had handed the enemy the keys to his fortress, all for a woman who was laughing at him from the battlements. He slowly lifted his gaze to meet Keelan's. There was no triumph in her eyes. There was only a quiet, profound certainty. He had walked into the room, fearing he would lose his fortune. He now understood he had already lost everything that ever mattered. The air in Evelyn Reed's boardroom was a physical presence, a dense, suffocating vacuum where Kelsey Jones's power used to be. The damning evidence of the corporate espionage lay on the polished mahogany between them, a glossy tombstone for his hubris. Kelsey stared at the documents, but he wasn't seeing the words. He was seeing a montage of his own folly. Chloe's seductive smile as she reviewed his confidential proposals, her seemingly innocent questions about his rivals, his own smug satisfaction as he confided in her. The affair was no longer a simple betrayal of his wife. It was a betrayal of his own mind, his own empire. He had mistaken a predator for a prize, and the cost was incalculable. Across the table, Marcus Thorne, a man paid millions a year to be invincible, looked pale and shaken. His legal arguments had evaporated. He was a general without an army, facing an opponent who had already won the war and was now simply dictating the terms of surrender. In stark contrast, Evelyn Reed exuded a predatory calm, watching the proceedings with the detached satisfaction of a master strategist, observing a flawless checkmate. And then there was Keelan. She had remained silent throughout the revelation, a portrait of unnerving stillness. She was no longer watching him with the wounded eyes of a wife. She was assessing him with the cool, discerning gaze of a successor. He felt a chill crawl up his spine that had nothing to do with financial loss and everything to do with this terrifying elemental shift in her. She let the silence stretch, forcing him to drown in his humiliation. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet, yet it cut through the tension like a razor. "My demands have changed." The statement was simple, devoid of triumph or anger, which made it all the more devastating. It was the voice of a CEO, not a victim. Kelsey looked up, a flicker of his old defiance returning. "Keelan, the $10 million severance package you offered." She continued, speaking over him as if he were a junior executive who had dared to interrupt, "is off the table. The apartment in Belgravia is irrelevant. This is no longer about a settlement for me to go away." Thorne, recovering some of his professional bluster, interjected, "My client is prepared to make a significantly more generous offer, Mrs. Jones. In light of the circumstances." Keelan's eyes shifted to Thorne, and for the first time he seemed to shrink in his expensive suit. "Your client is no longer in a position to make offers, Mr. Thorne, only to accept them." She turned her attention back to Kelsey, her gaze pinning him to his chair. "This is about the preservation of a legacy. My child's legacy. A legacy you nearly incinerated because you were so blinded by your own ego you couldn't distinguish an asset from an assassin." Kelsey flinched, the truth of her words a physical blow. "Here," she said, her voice dropping to an even more controlled, resolute tone, "is what is going to happen. You will begin by transferring 49% of your voting shares in Jones Industries into an irrevocable trust. The sole beneficiary of this trust will be our child, and I shall serve as the sole trustee until they reach the age of 25. Thorne opened his mouth to protest, but Keelan held up a hand, silencing him. "Furthermore, an additional 2% of your voting shares will be transferred directly to me personally. This is non-negotiable. Combined with the trust this gives me on behalf of my child and myself, a controlling interest of 51% in the company you founded." The sheer breathtaking audacity of the demand sucked the remaining air from the room. She wasn't asking for a payout. She was executing a coup. "You're insane," Kelsey finally whispered the words ragged. "The board, the shareholders, they will never accept it. They'll revolt." "Will they?" Keelan countered, a faint, ironic smile touching her lips. "I will be taking a seat on the board of directors, effective immediately. And we, Kelsey, will be presenting a united front. We will release a joint statement about our reconciliation, a decision made for the stability of the company, and our commitment to the family we are building. We will remain married in name only until a year after our child is born. After that, we can discuss a quiet, private dissolution. But the ownership structure," she leaned forward, her eyes like chips of ice, "will remain. This is corporate extortion." Thorne finally exploded. "It's legally dubious, unprecedented. We will fight this in every court in the state." It was Evelyn Reed who answered, her voice smooth as silk and sharp as glass. "Please do, Marcus. I invite you. While you're filing your motions, we'll be filing our own. We'll start with a formal report to the Securities and Exchange Commission, detailing how the CEO's personal conduct led to a catastrophic corporate espionage event. We'll follow that with Mr. Finch's complete file being anonymously leaked to the Wall Street Journal and Bloomberg. Imagine the headlines: Jones's folly billionaire's affair nearly sinks empire. While the stock craters the shareholder derivative lawsuits will pile so high on your desk, you won't be able to see your computer. The board won't be revolting against her. Kelsey. Evelyn said, her gaze landing on him with finality. They'll be ousting you with extreme prejudice. She let the grisly picture hang in the air. Keelan is not offering you a punishment. She is offering you a lifeline. She is offering to personally step in and clean up your catastrophic mess. She is offering to put her own name and reputation on the line to shield you from public and professional ruin. She is saving you from yourself. In return, she's taking the keys to the kingdom. Frankly, it's the best deal you're ever going to get. Kelsey looked from his lawyer's horrified face to Evelyn's triumphant one. But his gaze ended on Keelan. He saw the fire he had once admired, now refined into a crucible of immense strength. He had tried to confine her to a gilded cage, and she had responded by seizing the entire fortress, not with cannons and fire, but with intelligence and strategy. The war was over. He had lost before he even knew he was fighting. A great, shuddering breath left his body, the last gasp of his absolute power. His shoulders slumped in utter defeat. "Draw up the papers," he said, the words tasting like ash in his mouth war. 6 months later, the boardroom of Jones Industries was a different world. The aggressive monolithic portraits of industry Kelsey had favored were gone, replaced with striking pieces of modern art that were both bold and thoughtful. The energy in the room itself had changed. The palpable tension, the fear-based loyalty that had characterized Kelsey's reign had been supplanted by a collaborative, focused intensity. At the head of the long table sat Keelan Jones. Her pregnancy was now a beautiful, undeniable presence, a symbol of the new life she was breathing not just into her family, but into the company itself. She moved through the meeting agenda with an effortless command of the complex financial and logistical details, her questions sharp, her insights valued. The board members, a mix of old guard and new appointments she had made, looked to her for guidance, their respect genuine. Kelsey sat halfway down the table, a ghost at the feast. He was still a board member, his presence a necessary part of the reunited couple narrative, but his power was a phantom limb, an ache of something that was no longer there. He was a figurehead, voting as the 51% controlling interest dictated, watching the woman he had dismissed as a decoration expertly steer the company he had built back from the abyss. He saw her now, her brilliance, her tenacity, her grace under pressure, and was tormented by the knowledge that this incredible woman had been his partner all along, and he had been too arrogant to see it. That evening, after the board meeting, he found her in his old office, now unequivocally hers. She stood before the floor-to-ceiling window, gazing out at the glittering tapestry of Manhattan at dusk. "You've done well, Keelan," he said from the doorway. The words felt hollow, a vast understatement for the miracle she had performed. "It's a strong company," she replied, her voice even not turning around. "It just needed to be protected from its biggest liability." The unspoken indictment hung in the air between them, sharp and clear. He stepped into the room, the familiar space now feeling foreign, owned by her presence. "Our child," he began, his voice cracking slightly. I want to be a part of their life. A real part. It was the last piece of his legacy he had left to fight for. Keelan finally turned, her expression unreadable. It was not angry, not vengeful, but it held no trace of the softness he had once taken for granted. It was the face of a leader, a protector. You don't understand, Kelsey. This isn't a negotiation. Fatherhood isn't a title you hold. It's a responsibility you live every single day. You will be their father, yes. But your role will be one you earn. There will be no Disneyland weekends, no attempts to buy their affection with expensive gifts to assuage your guilt. She took a step closer, her gaze unwavering. You will be present. That means being there for the scraped knees and the sleepless nights, not just the photo opportunities. You will be reliable. That means when you say you will be somewhere, you are there without excuse. You will be respectful. That means you will respect me as their mother and the head of this company, and you will teach our child by example what it means to treat people with integrity. She placed a hand on her stomach, a gesture of profound, unshakable ownership. Our child will have a father, but they will be raised in a world built and protected by their mother, a world where their security is not dependent on anyone else's whims. Her voice softened, but lost none of its steel. I didn't do this for revenge, Kelsey. I could have watched this all burn and called it justice. I did this for them. I built these walls so high and made this foundation so strong that no one could ever again make them feel disposable or try to buy their future for $10 million. He stood there, stripped of all his defenses, and finally understood. He had started this by trying to sign a piece of paper that would erase her. Instead, she had rewritten their entire world with her own name at the top. He had no reply. There was nothing left to say. With a single defeated nod, he turned and walked out of the office, leaving the Queen alone on her throne, the city lights glittering at her feet like a conquered kingdom. And so the story of Kelsey and Keelan Jones isn't just a tale of wealth and betrayal. It's a powerful lesson in underestimation. It's about the quiet strength that grows in the shadows of someone else's ego. Keelan could have taken the money and disappeared. She could have exposed Kelsey for revenge and watched his empire burn. Instead, she chose the harder, smarter path. She didn't just escape the gilded cage. She took ownership of it, reforging it into a fortress to protect her child's future. She turned her pain into power and heartbreak into a hostile takeover. What would you have done in her position? Would you have fought for justice, for revenge, or for control? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. These stories of incredible resilience and strategic brilliance are happening all around us, often behind closed doors. If you were captivated by Keelan's journey from a pawn to a queen, please give this video a like, share it with someone who needs a story of empowerment, and make sure you subscribe to the channel for more real-life dramas where the underestimated rise up to claim what is rightfully theirs.